The Nintendo Switch 2 has been out for a while now, and honestly, the library has been stacking up fast. Whether you're into action, RPGs, horror, or just want something chill, there's a lot to dig into. So, let's count down 20 of the best single-player games you should be playing right now on the Switch 2. The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales, is the first HD 2D game to ditch turn-based combat for real-time action, and it actually pulls it off really well. You play as Elliot, an adventurer from the last human kingdom on a continent overrun by beast tribes. He discovers a mysterious time travel artifact called the Doorway of Time, alongside his fairy companion, Faye. And from there, the two of them journey through 4 different eras, past and present, to fulfill a 1,000-year mission. The story of discovery across those time periods keeps things genuinely engaging, even if the pacing stumbles a bit. Combat feels like a classic Zelda game: sword, shield, bow, bombs, and more, with Faye adding a fun layer where you use her magic abilities to solve puzzles and combo enemies in creative ways. Boss fights in particular shine here. Performance is mixed. Expect drops in handheld mode, especially on high settings. Around 40 frames per second handheld, closer to stable in docked. Still, a solid adventure with real heart.
What might be in here? Nice.
Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. After 7 years without a new Yoshi game, this one finally brings the little green dinosaur back in his most creative outing yet. A talking encyclopedia named Mr. Encyclopedia Mr. E for short crash lands on Yoshi's island, having lost all knowledge of the creatures inside his pages. Bowser Jr. somehow ends up stuck inside, and that's your setup. You play as Yoshi, diving into the pages of a living book, exploring colorful habitats chapter by chapter, studying creatures, figuring out how they behave, and documenting your findings. It's less about getting from point A to B and more about experimentation. Each creature reacts differently depending on what you do. Eat it, throw an egg at it, flick your tail at it, or bring another creature nearby. The discovery loop is genuinely addictive. Yoshi's classic moves are all here: flutter jump, egg throwing, ground pound, but now every action feeds into creature research. Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. This is a full remaster of the 1997 classic, with improved visuals, fully voiced dialogue, updated gameplay, and 2 modes: Enhanced and Classic. The story follows Ramza Biuv, a young noble swept into a war of succession called the War of the Lions, while his childhood friend Delita charts his own darker path through the same conflict. It's heavy, political, morally complex storytelling that still holds up incredibly well. The combat takes place on isometric, grid-based battlefields, where positioning, turn order, terrain, and job combinations all matter. Over 20 jobs to master, from White Mage to Dragoon, and abilities you learn carry over between classes, giving you insane flexibility in how you build your team. The Switch 2 version performs beautifully in both docked and handheld, smooth and responsive across the board. Quality of life additions like mid-battle saves and fast forward make it even better.
Where am I needed?
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This was a PS5 exclusive, built specifically for that hardware, and Square Enix somehow squeezed it onto the Switch 2. You pick up right after Remake, with Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, and the crew finally escaping Midgar and heading into a massive open world chasing Sephiroth. The game is enormous. Dozens of side quests, minigames, card games, open zones to explore. The combat is fast, stylish, and deep, with each character playing completely differently and synergy attacks between party members adding a whole extra layer. On Switch 2, it runs at a locked 30 frames per second, which holds pretty well in enclosed spaces, but dips noticeably in large open-world areas, sometimes into the 20s. There's also pop-in and softer visuals compared to PS5, but character models still look great, and the voice acting and soundtrack remain absolutely top tier. For a game this enormous, running on portable hardware, what Capcom and Square Enix pulled off here is genuinely impressive. Mina the Hollower is a top-down action-adventure set in the gothic world of Tenebrous Isle, where power sources, called spark generators, are failing and the island is getting consumed by darkness. You play as Mina, a mouse inventor and hollower, which means she can literally dig underground to dodge enemies, avoid hazards, and find hidden items. That burrowing mechanic is the core of everything here, and Yacht Club found endless clever ways to use it across dungeons and combat. The combat draws from the Souls-like playbook. You lose your bones currency on death and have to recover them, and the difficulty is real. There are 30 modifiers to adjust it though, 5 different weapons, each with their own playstyle, tons of trinket builds to experiment with, boss fights that demand pattern reading and adaptability. The Game Boy Color-inspired visuals and the soundtrack from Jake Kaufman with legendary composer Yuzo Koshiro are outstanding. Performance is razor-sharp on Switch 2 in both modes. Octopath Traveler 0 is a prequel set in the same world as the first game, bringing over 100 hours of content to the table. You create your own protagonist, a survivor whose hometown of Wishvale is destroyed by 3 villains representing power, wealth, and fame. The story is darker and more interconnected than the previous games, with over 30 recruitable party members to find across the world. The biggest mechanical addition is the 8-character party system, 4 in front fighting, 4 in the back healing, which adds serious depth and strategy to the already excellent break system, where you chip away enemy defenses to expose them for massive damage. A town-building side system lets you rebuild Wishvale into a proper base, with facilities that give you buffs, training, and crafting. Performance on Switch 2 holds mostly stable at 60 frames per second in both modes, with minor dips in intense battles. The visuals are HD 2D gorgeous, as expected.
Now or never. I summon thee, Elfric!
I appreciate it.
Machine Games built one of the best Indiana Jones games ever made. Set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, you step into the boots of Indy in 1937 as he chases a global conspiracy across enormous, detailed locations. It's a first-person action-adventure focused primarily on stealth, puzzle solving, and getting creative with Indy's toolkit, the whip, a pistol, and whatever improvised weapon is closest. The whole thing is authentically cinematic, and the voice work from Troy Baker captures Indy's attitude perfectly. On Switch 2, it runs at a steady 30 frames per second in both docked at 1080p and handheld at 720p. The docked experience is notably better quality, but handheld still looks crisp and runs smooth. A few NPC counts were trimmed to maintain performance, but it's barely noticeable if you haven't played other versions. The slower pace of the game, exploration, puzzles, stealth, works well at 30 frames per second. No dramatic drops, no crashes. Dynasty Warriors Origins. Instead of an overwhelming roster of 50-plus characters, Origins focuses on a single, nameless wanderer who gets drawn into the chaos of the Three Kingdoms era in ancient China. You pick a commander to follow, make decisions, and navigate the political fallout of history as factions clash around you, and multiple endings mean your choices actually matter. The Musou gameplay is better than it has ever been. Thousands of soldiers on screen, satisfying weapon variety, and new parry and dodge mechanics that add real depth. The story takes the historical epic seriously. On Switch 2, it runs at a stable 30 frames per second in the standard mode. Koei Tecmo deliberately chose this to keep the insane on-screen enemy counts intact, rather than cutting soldiers for 60 frames per second. There's a variable unlocked mode too, which floats between 30 and 60 frames per second and works better in handheld. Either way, this is one of the most impressive Switch 2 ports of a demanding action game.
You countered their attacks with great skill.
Trails in the Sky First Chapter. Set in the Liberal Kingdom, you follow Estelle and Joshua Bright step-siblings chasing down their missing father as they work their way up through the ranks of the Bracer Guild, the kingdom's freelance peacekeepers. The story starts small and personal, and slowly builds into something much bigger. It's the first chapter of what fans call one of gaming's greatest narrative achievements across multiple entries. Combat blends real-time field encounters with turn-based battles, featuring a deep orbment magic system and impressive craft abilities for each character. Rebuilt from the ground up, the visuals look stunning, and the voice cast brings these characters to life in ways the original never could. On Switch 2, it targets 60 frames per second and gets fairly close in both modes, though there are some inconsistencies and minor hitching. Handheld actually runs slightly better than docked. Still, one of the best-looking JRPG remakes in recent memory.
This is dangerous.
Rise of the Tomb Raider, 20-year celebration. Set roughly a year after the events of the 2013 reboot, Lara is obsessed with proving what she witnessed was real and leads a dangerous expedition into Siberia, chasing a relic called the Divine Source, said to grant immortality. The story is more confident than its predecessor, expanding Lara's character while maintaining the gritty survival tone. Gameplay mixes action-adventure traversal, puzzle-filled optional tombs, stealth, and ranged combat, with Metroidvania-style backtracking and gear unlocks. All Season Pass content and DLC is included in this package. On Switch 2, it runs at 30 frames per second and holds it pretty steadily, with only occasional stutters during scene transitions. Docked and handheld both output at 1080p, which is impressive. The game looks fantastic. Snow-covered Siberian environments still impress more than a decade later. Dragon Quest VII was infamous for being one of the most bloated, slow-starting JRPGs ever made. The original PlayStation version had no combat for the first 2 hours. This reimagining fixes nearly all of that. Set on a small island where nobody believes the outside world exists, you and your childhood friends discover ancient stone fragments that portal you back in time to islands in the past. Each one a self-contained story of people you must help before that island reappears in the present. It's episodic storytelling done really well. The diorama art style is adorable and distinctive. Random encounters are gone. Enemies roam the field visibly. The vocation job system is back and expanded, including a new ability to moonlight 2 jobs at once. The Switch 2 version runs at a smooth 60 frames per second with minimal load times. Some content from the original was trimmed. Casino, a few regions, which upset veterans, but makes it the most accessible and breezy version yet. Blueprints. You inherit the Mount Holly estate from your great-uncle, but you can only keep it once you find the legendary 46th room in a 45-room mansion. The house resets its layout every night, so every day you start fresh, drafting rooms from a randomized selection as you explore. Every door you open lets you choose which room appears behind it: a library, a boiler room, a dark room, a courtyard, and those choices shape the path to room 46. You have limited steps per day, so planning matters. The story unfolds through notes and environmental details scattered across the estate, slowly revealing a web of family secrets, political corruption, and buried history. There are no NPCs, no handholding, just you, the mansion, and your notes. Finding room 46 is just the beginning. On Switch 2, it runs at 30 frames per second in both modes, which some players found disappointing. But the game itself is so absorbing that you'll stop caring quickly. Pragmata. You play as Hugh Williams, a space engineer arriving at a lunar research station to find it overrun by malfunctioning AI robots. He meets Diana, a small android girl with the emotional range of a child and extraordinary hacking abilities, and the two of them form the emotional backbone of the whole game. The combat system is what sets this apart. You simultaneously aim and shoot with Hugh, while Diana hacks enemies, guiding a cursor across a grid to hit nodes that expose and weaken them. Watching the system flow together once you get the hang of it is deeply satisfying. The boss fights are spectacular. On Switch 2, it targets 60 frames per second, but doesn't consistently hold it. Docked sees drops into the 40s and 50s during busy sections. Handheld uses VRR to smooth things out, but can still feel choppy in the second half. The visuals required significant cuts to get there, running at around 540p natively before DLSS upscaling. The gameplay is excellent, and the Hugh-Diana dynamic is genuinely touching.
Be careful!
Monster Hunter Stories 3: Twisted Reflection. Set 200 years after a great battle, you play as the heir of the Kingdom of Azuria as a slow crystallization phenomenon begins consuming the land, freezing monsters, destroying habitats, and sparking political tensions between Azuria and the rival kingdom Vermeil. The conservation loop at the heart of the gameplay is brilliant. You clear out invasive species from ecosystems, reintroduce endangered monsters, hatch eggs to recruit new monsties, and gradually restore each biome. Turn-based combat runs on a rock-paper-scissors foundation: power, speed, technical, but layers on weapon selections, monstie synergy moves, and front and back row tactics that create genuinely strategic encounters. The story has actual nuance. No clear heroes or villains, just two kingdoms doing what they believe is right. Voice acting is strong, the semi-cel-shaded art style is gorgeous, and boss special attacks are genuinely spectacular. Dragon Quest I and II HD 2D Remake. Dragon Quest I is a simpler, solo adventure. A lone hero, descendant of the legendary Erdrick, tasked with reclaiming a sacred orb and defeating the Dragon Lord who stole it. Dragon Quest II expands things dramatically, with a party of 3 characters and a more sprawling world to explore. Both are reimagined with the stunning HD 2D visual style, new story content, expanded dialogue, quality of life features like visible enemies, battle speed options, and auto combat. They're not long games. DQ1 is around 10 hours, DQ2 around 15 to 20, but they're packed with charm and historical significance as the blueprints for everything JRPG that followed. The Switch 2 version offers 2 modes: quality at 30 frames per second with sharper visuals, or performance at 60 frames per second with softer visuals. It runs great, loads fast, and looks beautiful. If you've ever been curious where Dragon Quest, or the JRPG genre itself came from, this is the ideal entry point. Pokémon Pokopia. You play as a Ditto that has taken the form of a trainer, waking up in a post-human Kanto region. The humans are gone. The landscape is a ruin, and it's up to you to figure out what happened while rebuilding the world for Pokémon to return to. The gameplay loop is Dragon Quest Builders meets Animal Crossing. You terraform the land, harvest materials, craft furniture and habitats, attract specific Pokémon to live there, and listen to what they want to be comfortable. Each Pokémon has a personality and speaks, and Ditto gradually learns their moves to use as tools. Water Gun for irrigation, Cut for clearing trees, Rock Smash for mining. 4 sprawling biomes, a mysterious and surprisingly emotional story about what happened to humanity, and an addictive crafting and discovery loop that makes 40 hours disappear in what feels like minutes. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Set in the dystopian megacity of Midgar, Cloud Strife joins the eco-terrorist group Avalanche to fight against the Shinra Corporation that's draining the planet's life force. It's only one section of the original Final Fantasy VII, but Square Enix expanded it into a 30 to 40 hour epic with deeply developed characters, action RPG combat, and stunning cinematics. The combat blends real-time fighting with ATB gauge management for spells and abilities using materia to customize your build, and it feels excellent. The Intergrade edition includes the full Yuffie episode, as well as new streamlined progression options that let you adjust difficulty and speed through replays. On Switch 2, it runs at a solid 30 frames per second in both modes with very few drops, and looks genuinely stunning for the hardware. Docked at 1080p with DLSS is clean and sharp. This is widely considered one of the most impressive ports on the system, and it's the perfect way to get ready for Rebirth.
Nothing to it.
The full Cyberpunk 2077 experience, including the excellent Phantom Liberty expansion, on a handheld. Night City is one of the most realized open worlds in gaming, full of intricate side stories, faction politics, and a neon-drenched future where corporate power rules everything. You play as V, a merc who ends up with the digital ghost of deceased rock star Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves, stuck in their head after a heist gone wrong. What follows is a deeply personal story about identity, mortality, and what makes a life worth living. wrapped in hundreds of hours of content. The gameplay mixes first-person shooting with stealth, hacking, and deep RPG character builds. On Switch, too, it targets 40 frames per second in performance mode and 30 frames per second in quality mode, and it mostly holds, some dips in dense areas when driving, but generally smooth. DLSS helps the image quality significantly. The mouse and gyro controls work genuinely well, making this one of the most complete console ports in the library. DK's best game since Tropical Freeze, and genuinely one of the best 3D platformers Nintendo has ever made. Donkey Kong heads to Ingot Isle to collect Banandium gems, only to get ambushed by Void Kong and his Voidco Corporation, who are drilling to the planet's core to grant their wish. DK falls underground and meets Pauline, a 13-year-old girl trapped in a mysterious rock, and the two of them make their way through the layers of the Earth while their relationship grows into something genuinely heartwarming. The core mechanic is destruction. Almost everything in each layer can be smashed, dug through, or torn apart. Finding creative paths through solid ground feels incredible. In Bananza transformations, animal forms DK can briefly take, add extra combat and traversal options. The level variety is wild. The challenge stages range from nostalgic callbacks to brilliant puzzle design, and the boss fights escalate dramatically. Resident Evil Requiem. The game introduces Grace Ashcroft, an FBI analyst who's genuinely terrified of everything, investigating a brutal outbreak at a lunar research facility. Her sections are slow, methodical, classic survival horror, limited inventory, scarce ammo, enemies that won't die easy, real tension at every turn. Leon Kennedy returns later as the second playable character with a completely different gameplay style, faster, more action-focused, channeling the best of RE4. The two styles complement each other perfectly as the narrative toggles between them, building to a lore-heavy climax, with some of the best writing the series has had in years. On Switch, too, it targets 60 frames per second with DLSS upscaling, and largely delivers consistent 60 frames per second in smaller, tighter spaces, dipping into the 40s and 50s in bigger environments. Grace's sections, which dominate the first half, run beautifully. "20 games that prove the Switch 2's library is already something special." Whether you're looking for a relaxing afternoon with Yoshi, 100 hours in an HD 2D RPG, or genuine horror at 60 frames per second in the palm of your hand, there's something here for everyone. Which one are you playing right now? Drop it in the comments. See you in the next one.